Welcome to another edition of Courageous Conversations Live. I'm your host, Pierre Quinn, and listen, you are in for a special treat today. I am hanging out with Dee Bowden, founder of BCS Solutions. Dee helps small businesses reconcile, resolve, and recover old invoices to improve their cash flow. Dee, thanks for being my guest today.
Hey, Quinn, thank you so much. I'd like to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching this fabulous, courageous conversation on the world. I am Dee Bowden. I'm the founder and CEO of BCS Solutions. So let's get into it. Let me see. We got some water.
Yeah,
we're gonna be good.
I'm ready.
We ready.
Yeah.
Listen, we got to bring them in on the conversation we were having before we went live.
Yeah, let's jump right in. Dee, let's talk about your past 24 hours before we.
Oh my gosh.
Give it to us.
My past 24 hours have been like amazing. So for those of you who may not know, I was featured in Forbes magazine. So the fact that like what I do for a living is I recover money. I'm a debt collector on the business to business and business to corporation and business to government side. And the fact that my story talking about collecting and the way I do it, which is problem solving, customer service, and my secret sauce, which is gratitude, Forbes saw fit. Well, the person who writes for Forbes interviewed me and said, she's a CPA, so she's a chief financial officer as well. And she was like, "You're in her pipeline. I'm like the person that's on the front lines collecting, dealing with vendors."
Yeah.
And so she said, "How did you figure out that collections was these three things?" I said, "Well, because I've been doing it for a long time, and number two, I've got receipts, as they say in these streets, and I've got proof of collecting money." And she said, "Well, what kind of money have you collected?" I said, "Well, okay, how about $7.5 million for the United States Coast Guard headquarters in a year?" She was like, "What?" I'm like, wow. It's like that. I was like, "Yeah." I said, "I've done $6 million in 60 days working part-time for an IT firm. I've done $5, $10, $5,000, millions of dollars, hundreds of dollars, $2. But I learned three things. I learned that collections is problem solving, number one. It's kind of the way it's three things. It's problem solving, number one. It's customer service, an extension of customer service, number two, and number three, it's gratitude. But the way most people understand it is what had happened was, and they're like, so when you think about it, everybody has one of those what had happened was stories.
Yeah.
So, okay, you take your cell phone, whether you're team Android or iPhone, something goes wrong with your phone, you call the customer service. What had happened was I paid for a plan, and something is not working. And you because your team, whichever, you want somebody to get on the phone. "Hey, Mr. Quinn, let me verify your account. What's your mother's maiden name? We see that you have the such and such plan, and we want to apologize because you had to call us because it's a problem." And you're expecting extra customer service because whatever's wrong with your phone, you want it solved. Well, same thing with your money. If you provide a product or a service to a customer and you haven't been paid in 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days, though what had happened is how come I haven't gotten paid? And I figured out that what had happened was equals problem solving. I got to find out if you ordered 10 sneakers from me and I only gave you 8, I need to get the other 2 sneakers to you so you will be whole and you'll pay me for my 10 sneakers. I got to solve that problem. As the person that represents my business, I'm doing customer service, or I have somebody who does it for me. But how your interaction is with me when you interact with my business is all about customer service. What do you think is going on right now around the world? Customers, every company that has a business is sending out holiday cards. "Thank you so much for being one of our customers all year long. We appreciate you. Yada yada yada. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Kwanzaa, all the holidays, season's greetings." And then we look forward to you being we look forward to providing excellent service for you in 2021. What are they doing? Extending customer service, because guess what? They want to make sure that you're going to stay on board with them. They're working to smooth any rough edges, and that you're going to stay with them for the next year. That's what we do.
So I want to go back to the software company that you were working with, and I was listening to an interview that you did earlier on in 2020, and working with a company. And one of the things that you said, man, I wrote it down. It was so good. So many businesses have money on the books, but not in the bank.
Oh yeah.
how does a business get to where, like, you know, we've shown all these sales, but there's nothing in our bank account?
Oh, well, if it's all right with you, how about I tell you the story? And I'll get to that. So this is one of those, what had happened was, seriously, what had happened was, so originally I used to work for a small IT firm outside of Boston where I'm from.
Okay.
I got hired by the collections department and they said, listen, welcome aboard. You know, you bring you into your cubicle. Here's your cubicle. Here's your accounts. And they had $8 million worth of sales on the books, not in the bank. Now, every time I tell this story, I still have to pause because I'm like, that's a lot of money. Now, how that happens is if you're a small business and you're scaling, you're still focused on getting the next sale, the next sale, the next sale. You're doing the front end, but you're not worried about the back end because you're thinking, I'll pay them. They'll pay me. Well, I think somewhere the ball got dropped. So they had a small collections team, about 4 or 5 of us. They had $8 million and they're like, we need somebody else who knows how to do collections. That's what I'm known for. They're like, here, welcome aboard. Here's your list of accounts. And I was like, oh gosh. So I literally, because I'm a believer, I literally went to God and it was kind of, I jokingly say it like this. It was kind of like, hey God, yes, D, how are you? You know what? Overall, God, I'm good, but I got this issue and it's like, it's an $8 million issue.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do this. And so I literally asked God for some wisdom and I really got quiet. And what came to mind was, what do you have in your hand? Well, you have a problem. And you have to figure out what's the problem, what I call the disconnect. So what happened? So the sales happened on the front end, but the sale didn't go all the way through. So what you heard was the sale is not complete until the money's in the bank. It's no different than when you go to the store and you swipe your debit or credit card. You're waiting for these 2 magical words, transaction approved. It's the same thing. Yeah. It's the exact same thing. But you don't get to leave the store and you don't get a receipt until they say transaction approved. So what had happened was there was all these transactions that had not been approved, meaning the money wasn't in the bank, and somebody forgot to make sure that the software licenses, the computers, whatever they sold, that the process went all the way through. So when I got hired, they gave me my list of accounts. I said my prayer. I got my download. I went to work and I solved the problem by collecting $6 million in 60 days while working part-time. Now, that part is phenomenal. Wow. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, that's great. And it is. But the reason that BCS Solutions exists is this. After working that hard to collect that much money, the CEO of the company says, come downstairs, we want to have a chat. And I kind of joke and say, you know, if you have a boo or a booette and he or she says, we want to chat, you're like, I don't want to talk to you because that means there's already problems. Yep. So we come downstairs and I'm thinking, you know, because I'm thinking, hey, I done collected $6 million for my part of my team. We're getting a bonus. Because think about it. It's the end of the quarter. We done crushed it. No, that's not what happened. So what had happened was we come downstairs and they said, listen, thank you, everybody. That's sales, contracts, order entry, invoicing, and collections. That's my department for everything y'all have done. Appreciate what you've done, but we've made an executive decision and we're closing the business. You got 30 minutes to go get your box up your stuff out your cubicle and head out the door. This is 2 months before Christmas. So I'm sitting here like, I thought it was a joke. And they were like, no, for real, it's gone. And like, you got to go get your box and your plant and leave the building. So I watched everybody, 100 people work for a small business, you know, putting their blood, sweat, and tears. Yeah. Everybody loses their job 2 months before Christmas. And what touched me then, as it does today, is that number one, I was an employee then, and I will never know what happened at the executive level that even though we collected a lot of money, that wasn't enough to save the business. The reason I'm so passionate about collections, especially on the business to business level, is that you can think that because you've made all these sales, you have this money, and you actually don't. Because you can sell something, but that doesn't mean you've gotten paid for it. And that's the part that I think a lot of small businesses and medium-sized businesses forget. It's like, you're like, oh yeah, I got the sale. Do you? Not really. You had a conversation. Somebody said they were going to buy something, but everything hasn't gone through. So you haven't sold anything. You haven't delivered on your product or service. You haven't invoiced, and you haven't gotten paid. That's where the sale is not complete until the money's in the bank actually comes from. And it's because of what happened to me personally is why I created BCS Solutions to train and teach small business owners to track your accounts and make sure you're following basically the bouncing ball from when you sell to when you get a contract to when you deliver your product or service to when you invoice, in my lane, when you collect your money.
You bring so much energy and personality to a conversation that a lot of people maybe aren't familiar with or uncomfortable with, that idea of collections, of recovering revenue.
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, it's not a glamorous, like most people say, I want to go into collections. I want to go into revenue recovery.
Right.
But what inspired you to even be in a position to get the job with the software company back in Boston, to even consider revenue recovery as an industry that you wanted to work in general?
Great question. Well, what I discovered is I like to solve problems. And it's kind of like I've always been that kid. Well, I'm grown now, but I was always that kid that back in the day, I always was inquisitive, and I always wanted to know why stuff didn't work.
Yeah.
And so my career has always been in contract administration. So every business has a contract. If you whether you have a quote, or whatever. But I've always been in contract administration, and contract administration touches sales and orders and invoicing and money. So that's the overarching thing. And then happen to get into revenue recovery is because number one, I used to work for an engineering firm, and my team was building a water filtration plant up in Hemlock, New York, and the city stopped paying us. And I was like, why? And the guy said, listen, we told you we have a particular standard for how we want our invoices. Y'all didn't do what we said. So since you won't listen to us, we have this magic wand. We're going to stop paying y'all. So until you fix this, you're not getting paid. And I learned then, this is almost 30 years ago, that collections and contract administration is all about problem solving. And until you solve the problem, the most powerful thing they have is to hold up your money. And when they hold up your money, it makes you learn how to solve problems. It makes you learn how to do customer service. And I learned the secret sauce was also gratitude. And so those three things have been a part of my journey. And then the more I got into this, the more I was like, this is actually fun. And most people are like, are you kidding me? I can't stand this stuff. I know, but that's because that's a decision that I made. Because think about it. When you hear the word collections, most people think about people that are aggressive, they're assertive, they harass you. Now that's consumer collections. That's not my lane. I'm in business. So I deal with business to business corporations, business to government. So there is no harassing. There is no, being super aggressive and anything like that. Because that's real simple. I mean, that gets you in all kinds of trouble. Unfortunately, because people hear the word collections, they're already on the defensive. And so when I have this conversation, I'm talking about, if you work for a corporation, there's usually a team of collectors. There's a team of accounts receivable. Those are the people that are on the phones trying to resolve the problems, trying to figure out what did the salesperson do that now on the back end, I got to fix this because, the salesperson said, listen, yes, I can send you 100 sneakers. There were no sneakers in the warehouse, but I sold you 100. I'm gonna get you sneakers. No, you're not, because there's not 100 in the warehouse, but I done sold this. So on the back end, when I'm trying to collect it, it's like, how did you? Well, that's what they did. Listen, if you've been in business, because they love them, but they will do some stuff. You're like, I don't even know how to supposed to fix this. And so I learned over the course of my career, and now in business, that you have to solve problems. And if you think about it, whenever people go into business, whether it's a small, medium, or large business, why did you go into business? Because you believe that you could solve the next problem.
Yeah.
Think about it. You got McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's. What do? They sell the same thing, hamburgers. But McDonald's sells one kind of hamburger. Burger King sells another kind of hamburger. Wendy's sells another kind of hamburger. Why? They solve three different problems of how you like hamburgers. Each of them have a slogan. Each of them have a way they do it. They solve a problem. They do their customer service, and they do gratitude. Welcome to Wendy's. Welcome to McDonald's. Welcome to Burger King. How can I take your order? Yada, yada. It's all the same thing. If you look at computers, you've got Dell, Hewlett Packard, IBM, and I'm sure others. They all have the same thing. They're all trying to solve a problem. They're trying to make sure that you can put your information into their system and use your equipment to do what you do. That's what we do. Cars. Pick a car. Toyota, Honda, Acura, all of them. They're automobile first. They all do the same thing. They solve a problem, get you from point A to point B. Customer service, gratitude. Same thing. It's those three principles.
Yeah.
You can see them over and over and over again. So how it shows up.
There's a challenge sometimes in the entrepreneurial space, and even in the corporate space, where you have people wanting to, early on, let's get the large contract, let's get the large deal, let's get the large positioning.
Yep.
And not learning how to leverage or to maximize the lessons from the smaller opportunities that they receive, and then
Yep.
how to grow from there. What's your advice to some of these emerging entrepreneurs or even seasoned professionals out here who still haven't learned the value of maximizing smaller opportunities?
Number one, the best way I can show you that is this. You got to start here. Then you go here. Then you get to do this for it. You get to supersize it. You really do. But here's the thing: you can't neglect the small opportunities, because until you manage the small ones, you don't get to grow here, and you definitely don't get here. Because why would I give you this supersized contract and I can't even trust you at this level? I'm not doing it. If I'm smart, I'm not doing it. I need to see what you can do at this level. Then you prove yourself. Then you get here. I know this is funny, but. And then you get it. But it's true. Those are great examples, because here's the thing. I know most of us, when you jump out here in business, you want to land a large contract. You got to walk before you run. People have to see you and see that you can actually do what you say. Because in these social media streets, as you and I both know, you can put up something on Facebook and say, oh yeah, I do this and this and this and this. And then somebody checks you, you're like, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. You pull back the cover. You're like, yeah. You don't do none of this. But you keep saying you. I swear you keep selling this. I'm asking you for instructions. Show me how you do what you do, and you can't answer any of my questions. Somebody loves to clap for. But hey, but it's true, and that's the thing. I think sometimes I would tell them, number one, before you go after those large contracts, I would say to have a succinct or a consecutive track record. People should be able to look and see, what have you done over time. It's like, even though we're talking about business, but even in your corporate career, you don't get to become a senior VP or director of anything until you actually can demonstrate that you've learned the principles and processes of how things work. Yeah. And then you demonstrate this over time. I didn't get to become a contract administrator overnight. I was a data entry clerk first. Let's go back all the way to the beginning.
Wow.
I was a data entry person first. I had to do data entry for weeks, and then I went into accounts payable. I had to learn how to do invoicing, and then I had to serve as a junior contract administrator for a year under a senior person and demonstrate another year that I could actually do what he was teaching me. Then I got promoted. So the story when I talked about the water filtration plant, when that happened, I was promoted to be a contract administrator over a construction division inside of an engineering firm. But I started as a data entry person first. I had to work my way through this. And then I could sit down at the table and say, okay, yes, I can be the contract administrator for this construction division. Yes, I can oversee a multi-million-dollar water filtration plant get built, and I can make sure that the invoicing and the prime contractors and the subcontractors, everybody gets paid on time, and I can solve the problems, and I can do customer service, and I can show gratitude. That's how I started, and I've been doing those principles for years. So the symbols is what showing how I got started was doing data entry first. I did this part. Then I had to serve under somebody else. Then I finally got to be a contract administrator, and then I got to run my own team, and then I got to do that. And then I decided to go back to school and back to school again and go back to school again, and finally decided to launch BCS Solutions because I want to be able to make a difference and a dollar, but I also want to teach business owners how to manage their cash flow so that they will actually be here. What's painful for me is when I see businesses that are leaving money on the table because they don't want to ruffle the feathers of the customer. But I'm like, there's a way you can do it so you're not in those adversarial conversations. Sometimes it gets sticky. Oh, yes, it does. Let's not paint this picture where it's always rosy. It's not always, but how you handle it, in terms of, do you have all your facts? Is there an issue that needs to be resolved? That's why I say collections is problem solving is customer service, and my secret sauce is gratitude. People keep saying, why do you keep saying gratitude? Well, I personally believe just saying thank you. Thank you for being my customer, number one. Thanks for taking my call, number two. Thank you for bringing to my attention that there was something wrong and giving me the opportunity to fix it. Those are the things that's what a true business owner does. That's what I believe. I mean, people are like, that's not funny. Well, take it for what it is. I just know that it's what has worked successfully for me. And as I said earlier, it got me featured in Forbes. So clearly I'm doing something right.
Oh, man, you're giving us so many insights here. I want to go back to David Turner's question. What are the keys to leveraging for the large hands? And I know you kind of answered this before, but I want to modify the question, especially related to relationships. You start up data entry. And a lot of times when we, as professionals, we find ourselves, we recognize that maybe we're more gifted, capable, or experienced than the role. Maybe we've outgrown the role. We have to kind of sit here for a while. And the transition piece comes for us to grab the next opportunity. How do we leverage kind of connections and relationships with the big hand in mind?
Well, I think number one, you have to show that you are willing to, that you can do, like I call like almost like a seesaw. You're good here, but you want to be there. And I think you still have to, prove yourself, show yourself accountable. You have to prove it. Now, I mean, I had to, in order for me to become the contract administrator, I had to, number one, demonstrate all the way back in the beginning that I understood the processes. So I was doing data entry. I had to show that I knew how to enter information into a system. I had to problem solve even back then, because when there were batches of invoices that were put into the system wrong or something didn't balance, what did I have to do? I had to problem solve back then. I had to fix it then. When I did accounts payable, I dealt with customers all day long. I had to demonstrate that I could get on the phone, I could resolve problems, I could talk to customers all day long. I also had to be willing to serve under somebody else who was a senior person. He was a senior contract administrator. He's a former military person, so he had been serving in the Army at that time. He was a senior administrator. I had to be willing to serve under him, even though I thought I knew more. It was like, but I wanted, in order for me to get to the larger hands, I had to be willing to go through the process. Nobody, I mean, unless you're that person that somebody can just handpick you and put you there. Even if they put you there, you have to demonstrate that your character and your skill set allows you to be there for the long term, or they've just made a huge mistake.
Yeah. Do you give us a story from the space of maybe recently, maybe a client that you worked with, maybe you coached, maybe it was a podcast episode that you were on, and as you were teaching, as you were sharing, as you were training, as you were partnering with someone, you walked away from that experience saying, yep, this is another reason why I do what I do?
Well, I can give you that right now. So I do what I do I can do that right now because number one, all right, you said a podcast. So I've done a lot of podcasts this year, and one of the things I've done is I've pretty much told the same story. And I've had people ask me, why do you keep telling that same story? Because I want people to understand this. If you think about it, when you go into business, to solve a problem, to make a difference. So Take your cell phone. My phone is a Samsung 9. Now I know there's there's team Samsung, team iPhone. I'm team Samsung. So you want to know why I do what I do. Number one, why everybody who decides to go into business decides to solve a problem. That's it. And so when I talk about that, and so I can do it this way. In my career, I have found that there are people that don't like to get into the why behind the what. Most people like to kind of glaze over stuff. So because I deal with government contracts, I have to know the why behind the what. I'll give you an example. I close out contracts for a living. And so I had a vendor that basically I was closing out the contract. So basically this is another one of those, what had happened was I'm reconciling the contract. So basically, let's take you, for example. Let's say let's say your company, Pierre Quinn Inc., had a contract with a government agency. And my job is to reach out to you and say, okay, hey, Pierre, hey, Dee, how are you doing? Good. Listen, per the contract, we saw that you were awarded a contract for $10,000. You provided $8,000 worth of training, and there's $2,000 left. Mm-hmm. I need to find out whether the $2,000 is you still need it or it gets to come back to the agency. So what had happened was I'm reconciling, and what happened was the vendor said, "Hey, we returned this money back to the United States Treasury." I'm like, really? Because I'm reconciling it and I'm thinking that I have a certain amount that I'm looking for, and they're like, "No, we put this money back." So what had happened was they returned the money, but they put the wrong contract number on the check. So like, in your old school check, you put memo and you put whatever. They put the wrong contract number on it. I'm like, oh, so what had happened was you did this. So the money's been sitting in a suspense account since February. It's now December. I'm like, are you kidding me? Nope. So you asked me why I do what I do, because number one, that's our tax dollars that's sitting out there.
Yeah.
Nobody knows where it is. So I do this because number one, I love to solve the problems, and I love being able to teach why the why behind the what and the details. Mm-hmm. Regardless of where you are in business, you always have to know what's going on. The reason I talk about having a tracker is so that you know how many customers do you have, what's the name of your customer, what's the contract number, what's the dollar amount, what did you sell them? Did you sell them 10 sneakers, 1 sneaker, whatever? Mm-hmm. When are you supposed to deliver it to them? When are you supposed to invoice them? And when are you supposed to get paid? I teach that because that's so important, because you don't know basically, if you take it on a biblical standpoint, what's the state of your flocks? How do you know how many flocks you have if you don't track them? Yeah. Everything in life gets measured. You see the books behind me? I know how many books I have. I'm sure you know how many books you have. The point is, everything gets measured. If you don't measure it, you don't know what's wrong and what needs to be fixed. That's why I do what I do, is because I want you to come away with, okay, if I learn to track my accounts, if I learn to problem solve, if I learn to extend excellent customer service, and I extend gratitude, I'll be able to see a shift. And then wherever there's a disconnect, I'll know I need to address it. Either I do or somebody in my team needs to, so that we can keep our customers and keep growing.
You mentioned team, Dee, and I know we're going to wrap up this conversation, but I got to ask you this. Question comes in from Dr. Sidney Freeman Jr. He says, when starting your own small business, when do you contract out to others? Mm-hmm. And do you just do it yourself? I know a lot of small business owners, entrepreneurs, kind of like an octopus. You got an arm and just everything. And some things we don't do well, but we say, I got to do it myself until I get to a certain level. At what stage do you begin to process what goes to others?
That's it. First of all, hey, Sydney, thanks. A great question. So when you contract out, number one, and when you look at all the boxes, number one, if you're not really good at sales, then that might part of what you're doing when you're starting to build your business is you have to figure out, okay, what's the problem that you solve in the space? That's number one. And then are you good at sometimes? Okay, let me put it this way. Everybody who starts a business usually fulfills all of the things. You are a salesperson, you're the contracts person, you're the invoice person, you're the collections person, you're the marketing person, you're the social media person, you all of them in the beginning, because you are. Let's just be real. You're it for all those boxes. If you come from corporate, you're probably used to seeing that org chart, and you have your own little boxes. Mm-hmm. Your name is in all of them. You're like, good night. This is a lot. There's a lot. I was like, man, because when you come out of corporate, there's somebody else that does all that. You do your lane. There's a box. There's a person for every other box. When you first start your business, you are the boxes. You're all the boxes. But when you know to start outsourcing to other people is, number one, if you start looking at all your boxes and you realize, okay, I'm really not good at bookkeeping. Mm-hmm. I don't like doing invoicing. I don't like tracking my expenses. I don't like doing that. Well, I would suggest before you even get in further into business, find a bookkeeper that you can start, and they can be a part of your team. Maybe it's 5 hours a week or 5 hours a month. That person gets your account set up so that part. You can get started. Number two, if you're doing sales, if you don't really like to do sales, you may have to consider talking to somebody who does sales. And you can, and everything doesn't have to be full blown like you came from corporate. It might be a person that does sales, 10 hours a month. You can start small. Get everything that I think the misconception is everybody thinks that when you start your business, if you're coming from corporate America, they had teams that had been developed for years. You're one person getting all of this started. You have to start small. You got to start with, one person that can do, some things for you for a few, for the month. And then, you have to build that relationship. And then if that doesn't work out, you may have to get another person. Part of another thing is starting to network. Part of it is finding the people that do what you don't do. And okay, how do I do this? Well, some of this is you have to have the conversations and ask them. Number one. Number two, to Sydney, there's an organization called SCORE. I think it's called Service Corps of Retired Executives. They provide free advice on how do you actually build your business. And so if you don't know how to do this, it's called SCORE, SCORE.org. And the Small Business Administration. That's free information that they will teach you how to do what you don't know how to do. And then you get a guide on this, because even though you're the best at what you do coming out of corporate, you're an employee first. Then you've got to switch your mindset into how do I manage my business? How do I set up legally? What kind of business? What am I going to do? How much upfront money do I need to get started? All those things. You can't do all this by yourself. You have to get trained. And so the training comes from SCORE. It comes from the Small Business Administration. It also comes from taking classes. All the things I'm telling you to do are things that I've done. I continue to take classes. I continue to work to get better at doing this. Even public speaking. I mean, getting here and talking live. I didn't want to come out here and be a speaker. This was not on the list. I just wanted to collect money. They're like, no, you got to learn how to talk. I'm like, oh man, okay, cool. I got to go take classes. And I'm saying that to say that this entrepreneurial journey, that's what it is. It's a journey. You start with an idea. For the people, as I said, for my people, for the people in the back, let me say this. I had a dream, which was to make a difference in $1. Mm-hmm. I didn't know how I was going to do that, but I have this one story. I worked for the small IT firm. They had $8 million worth of AR. I collected 6. I lost my job. I didn't like how I felt. And I knew that if I didn't like how I felt, I didn't know what exactly I was going to do with that, but I just knew that learning to tell that story and sharing that story and sharing my passion about wanting to make sure that small business owners don't end up like what happened to me personally has been what God has allowed me to journey on. When I showed the 3 hands, that's how this started. It started with me working for I worked for somebody else. I still work for somebody else. I'm a dualpreneur. I still have a career and I'm building my business. Mm. But the point is, I still wanted to make a difference. And I've been working on telling the story, crafting trainings, teachings, all of this, but it started with the story. It started with my story and what happened to me personally. And that if I could make a difference and teach another small business owner not to lose money and leave money on the table, then I've done what I'm supposed to do. And that's why I'm here.
Dee, man, such incredible insight. I mean, you were on fire there for a moment, so I had to let the conversation continue to roll. For people looking at the specific types of services and support you provide, it's really an overview of what that is and what's the best way to reach out to you. I know we got your website on our banner underneath your name.
Yep.
But if there's another way, maybe social media, LinkedIn, because we're on LinkedIn Live.
Yeah, definitely.
For people to contact.
So best way to reach me, well, first of all, before we get into that, Pierre, thank you so much for this opportunity. This has been absolutely amazing. I've had so much fun, number one. Number two, BCS Solutions provides training for small, medium-sized businesses. We provide outsource collection services and also consulting. So if you have a team that needs to be trained on how to actually do business-to-business collections and you don't know how to do that, those services are available. If you're a company that's got a lot of AR and you just don't want to do it and you want to outsource it, you can outsource it to BCS Solutions. We can work alongside with you and do that. And then 3, we can come in and consult and show you what are the disconnects, where is the breakdown in what you want to do and how do you wish to change it within 30 to 60 or 90 days. The website is www.collectthecash.biz. That's www.collectthecash.biz. Connection with me, definitely on LinkedIn, number 1. Number 2 is Facebook. And then Instagram is @DCollects.
Man, Dee, thanks so much. I mean, you stopped by Courageous Conversations. You really opened up the fire hose. You gave us such valuable insights and everything that you shared. And we wish you all the best for the
Thank you.
coming year. And we are hoping, not we're hoping, we're encouraging all of you who were prompted, who were pulled by what Dee had to say. Listen, reach out. So many of us as entrepreneurs, as leaders, our biggest challenge is we're trying to do things by ourselves, and there are people out there like Dee who would love to help you in your journey. So reach out to her, and we'll see you next time on Courageous Conversations Live. Take care, Dee.
Take care.